Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
I mean,
We know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye.
What does confrontational mean? It means you fight for what you believe.
Enough was enough! And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother!
It is not merely our privilege to be strong, it is our duty to be strong.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Stephen Tripp. Thank you to everyone who is watching this. It's going to be a big episode today talking about all things the United Kingdom in 2024. But if you are watching this live, and we are on the CIBUK YouTube today, so very welcome all of you watching on the CIBUK YouTube. You can contribute in the chat. We want to hear from you. You can ask your questions. You can post comments. We are also looking for people. Maybe if you want to give your top 3 performers of the year or your worst performers, we want to hear from you. So please dial in and have your say. It'd be a great opportunity to hear from you. But if you want to contribute to Commanding the Narrative, please head to Buy Me a Coffee. I mention it every single time. It's the best way to throw us a few dollars. It's very nice when people want to part with their hard-earned money to support us. So Buy Me the Coffee is a good place to do that. It helps to pay for the stream. It helps to pay for the website. And most importantly, it gives us a very warm and fuzzy feeling inside, which is very important, I must say. Now, if you are not comfortable with Buy Me a Coffee, you can donate to us directly. Just head to commandingthenarrative.com and hit the donate button, and there's a few more options there on how you can donate to us. It's probably the best way for you to do it. And while you're there at Commanding the Narrative, sign up to the newsletter. You'll get a weekly newsletter from me with all the podcasts, articles, any events that are coming up. If you scroll down the bottom, there's the articles there and upcoming events. You'll get the links for the Rumble and the YouTube and Facebook. If you can't find them elsewhere, the website is the best place to go. And as I said, sign up, get the weekly newsletter from me. A lot of people are actually saying that they're enjoying reading the newsletter, which is nice. So it's really good for you guys to jump on board with everything that we're doing. I want to let you know, if you are in Australia, this is not so much for the UK audience, but you may be interested as well. There's a rally coming up in February. Now, it's called the Freedom Rally 2025. It's on the Parliament House lawn in Canberra. It'll be on Saturday, February 8th early next year. Starts at 10 a.m. And it's going to be protesting a lot of the issues that we're facing here in Australia: misinformation, disinformation bills, under 16 legislation, farmers' rights, a whole bunch of different things. So if you can make it to Canberra, please do so. We want to get a big crowd there to make a big statement. And it's really a good way of sending a message to these politicians that we're not happy with everything they're doing in this country. So please put that one in your calendar, and if you can make it, please do. And lastly, just quickly to let you know of my latest article in the Spectator Australia. It's all about my recent interview with Professor Will Happer. It's called "The Science is Settled by Politicians," which I think is a fitting name. That's not the name that I titled this article, but thank you to Alexandra Marshall, who changed the title, and I think she did a very good job of it. So thank you to Alexandra. Thank you to the Spectator for highlighting this issue. Now, as I said, today is all going to be about the United Kingdom. I've brought on my very good friend, and I call him the UK Correspondent to Commanding the Narrative. We've had him on before. I think episode 3 was the first time that we had Leigh on. You will also know him from the Global Discussion Forum. He's the chairman of the Global Discussion Forum. We've had quite a few of those this year, which have been very successful. He's the chairman of Facts for EU.org. He's also the chairman for CIBUK. For the Australian listeners, if you're wondering what CIBUK means, it means Campaign for an Independent Britain. It's been around since the late 1960s, so it's a significant group there in the United Kingdom, and he's also chairman of a lot of other groups as well. He's a very busy man. Let's bring him on. Leigh Evans, welcome back to Commanding the Narrative.
It's an absolute pleasure, Stephen, as ever, and you're looking good. And can I just say about your newsletter, I've been taking it for a while now. I have a huge amount to read every week, but I always make a point of reading yours. So I would urge your viewers to sign up to that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know you've always been a big supporter of mine, and you've been going through some health issues as well, which we've touched on in the past. People can see that by your appearance. I think it suits you in a way.
Well, you're very kind. I've kind of gone with the eye patch. I've kind of gone with the Jack Sparrow look from what was it?
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah. Listen, if you're going to have a major eye operation, you might as well have a bit of fun with it. So I just got out on, well, just in time for this show, really. Got out yesterday, and delighted to be with you today. So let's not dwell on that.
Well, I know Piers Morgan has a former Navy SEAL on who wears an eye patch, so maybe you'll be on Piers Morgan's show very, very soon, which I think he's doing some excellent work lately. I'm really enjoying what Piers Morgan is doing. I was never a big fan of his, but Piers Morgan Uncensored is something that's really popping up on my playlist more and more. I'm listening to it almost every night.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a pleasure to be with you and with your audience, and I think we might have some folk from the UK and from Europe joining us tonight. When I say tonight your time, it is of course
yes.
Morning time over here in the UK and Europe.
I just noticed the little Union Jack behind you as well. It's a nice touch. I think that's nice.
Well, you know, I know the next thing you're going to say is that yours is bigger than mine, but size doesn't matter, Stephen.
No, of course not. Of course not. All right, let's dive right into it. Now, this is an important one. Now, this is an article that both you and I co-wrote in Facts for EU. It's published on Friday. Fighting for freedom, can our Aussie cousins show the Poms the way? And it's all about mainly probably a lot of the issues that we're going to be discussing tonight. There's a lot of crossover with the issues that we're facing here in Australia and the issues that you're facing in the UK. We have two prime ministers that are probably just as unpopular as each other. They almost look very, very similar in a lot of ways. What do you want to say about this article? Have you received any feedback so far from your listeners and audience?
Absolutely, yeah. All positive. Very interesting. I think what we tried to do in that article, you and I, Stephen, is draw people's attention to the commonality of so many issues that we're facing right across the world. And in this case, it is across the world. Australia and the UK share similar challenges with the governments that we have and the policies that are being enforced on the population. And in some ways, I think the Australian government, the Albo government, has that's Anthony Albanese for the Brits and the Europeans who are watching, has actually been pursuing some policies that it seems like our UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, is following. Several months behind, but nevertheless, same sorts of things coming up. And I think we tried to highlight that, didn't we, Stephen? And didn't do too bad a job, I think.
Yeah, well, I hope so. But look, you've got your ear to the ground. You're writing these articles 5 days a week. You're doing a lot of research behind them. You're speaking directly to not only parliamentarians in Britain, but also in the EU Parliament as well. I'm sure you're getting a lot of feedback from your audience and your readers. What is the perception from your point of view of UK people when it relates to Australia?
That's a good question, and I think it's an important question too, because I'm not certain that it's totally understood in Australia, but certainly I can speak for the UK in this. there is a very positive feeling about Australia in the UK. It's quite interesting. If you talk to the older generation, they feel a certain amount of shame at the way that Australia was treated when we were taken into the EU originally. And we're talking the early 70s now. So we are talking an older audience, but anyone from that audience, we tend to get comments like, well, thank goodness we're now putting things right with our Australian friends. There is a great deal of goodwill in the UK towards Australia. I'm just speaking from what I receive an enormous amount of correspondence every day from normal, ordinary people. And that's the feeling that I get. When it comes to Europe, then again, I have never heard anything bad said about Australians, quite the reverse. There seems to be a bit of bemusement, actually, amongst EU citizens as to why the EU still has not done a trade deal with Australia, whereas the Brits managed it in 18 months, which must be an all-time record for any free trade agreement anywhere in the world. But that goes to show, doesn't it, just how close the two countries have got.
Yes. Now, it's always fun to look back over the last year. There's been a lot of serious issues that has happened both here in Australia, but also particularly in the UK as well. So not all the issues are fun, but we thought we'd try and have a little bit of fun, especially, with Christmas coming up and the New Year. So we're gonna do first your top 5 social media articles on Facts for EU, and then we'll also do the top 5 from your website. But to bring it in, you're going to have a little bit of you've requested a little bit of a blast from the past. So this is a big intro requested by Leigh.
Here we go at this week's Pick of the Pops Top 20.
Okay, there you are, Leigh. So you can kick things off. So the top 5 social media articles on Facts for EU for 2024.
Yeah. I can't possibly match Alan Fluff Freeman, who you heard there, who was a very popular Radio 1 DJ back in the day. But here we go. So coming in at number 5 for the most popular posts that we did in 2024 was a newcomer, science. And it was about how the UK has an alternative to the EU's Horizon project, and that proved to be very popular. So that was number 5. And I should mention, Stephen, that we're talking about an enormous number of articles. So for anyone to hit the top 5, they are doing extremely well. Number 4. We've then got, where are we? We then got an anniversary. It was our 4th anniversary since we left the EU. That was very popular because we talked about how the United Kingdom as an independent country was motoring whilst the EU was stalling. At number 3,
let's just quickly go through that because you've got a list of some of those here. So in the 4 years, jobs are up by over 2 million, pay is up by over 40%, GDP continued growth, exports up by 39% to the EU and up by 57% to the rest of the world. Total exports since the referendum, £5.1 trillion. The stock market up by 13.5%, investment up, number of rejoiner MPs down, share of liability for EU's growing debt mountain avoided completely, and thousands of new EU laws, regulations, directives avoided completely. So it's pretty successful by the sounds of it.
Sounds great, doesn't it? And it's all true, Stephen, because we do our research from official sources. And so everything you read on the factsforeu.org website does come from official sources. Sadly, the public are not being informed of all of this. They're getting a whole load of negativism from the state broadcaster, the BBC, and other broadcasters too, and some of the print media. So we see it as our duty to actually tell people the facts, and we don't embellish the facts. They are the facts. You know, these come from the official statistics organisations. They come from places like the Bank of England, Office for Budget Responsibility, Office for National Statistics, etc., etc. So it's an impressive list, isn't it, that you just read out? But it just happens to be true, and it belies the myths that are being perpetrated by those who, shall we say, probably are more in favour of a globalist UK that would then exclude Australia effectively and would negate the great new relationship we're having with your country.
Definitely. Okay, so we want to keep rolling. Number 3.
Yeah, so so that was when we when the anniversary of when we left the EU. Number 3 is interesting. This is about NATO, and the Dutch had a prime minister for some 13 odd years, I think, a guy called Mark Rutte. And if you meet him, you know, he's a very charming individual and all the rest of it. But during his 13-year tenure as prime minister of his country, the Netherlands, they never once hit the minimum NATO target for defense spending. And yet he was nominated and approved as the new Secretary General of NATO, which seemed at the time to be a little bit odd, to put it mildly. So, you know, it's a bit like a fox being put in charge of the hen coop, if you want to put it in those terms.
And this is an issue that Donald Trump talks about a lot. NATO not paying its way, is that right?
Correct. And you know, he's very upset. Has been for years. As soon as he takes power, I think that the European countries are going to come in for it again, including Germany, which, you know, I'm sure we'll return to, who also don't pay their fair share or anything like it. When I say their fair share, I'm talking about the minimum NATO requirement, which is only 2% of GDP. Trump's now talking about us needing 5% of GDP to spend on defense, because the world has changed and the threats are increasing. It's interesting, you know, we have slightly different threats between our countries. You've definitely got a threat there with the South China Sea, which is not a million miles away from you guys. You've also got threats in terms of your trade with China. China is now allied to Russia, Iran, and North Korea. There's kind of an axis that is building there, and I think my teams think that actually Trump is probably telling us what we need to be told, that we need to get serious about beefing our defense up a bit. But yeah, you're right. I mean, he is going to be highly critical again when he comes in of European countries. The UK is the only one that has actually met that target, just so you know, consistently throughout that period. The Greeks have done rather well, if you want to look at the figures. Why is that? They buy from the Germans and they're worried about the Turks. So the German armaments industry have done incredibly well out of Greece. But the reason that Greece's defense spending has been what it is because they have an ongoing dispute with the Turks. That's a little snippet you won't read in your newspapers, even over there, Stephen.
Yeah, it's a pretty scary world with all the conflict going on at the moment. Hopefully, I know a lot of people are banking on Donald Trump to be able to turn that around. It's quite scary that only we have to rely on one man to be able to do it, but it seems to be the situation that we're in the world at the moment.
Yeah. Well, should we just rattle through the last two?
Yep.
On these are the most popular items on social media that Facts for EU ran in the whole of 2024. So number two is our good old friend Germany, and this was a beautiful comment that we got from the CEO, the outgoing CEO of their stock exchange. And Germany, for your Australian audience, Germany is the #1 economy of the EU. The EU would fall apart without Germany. And this is the outgoing CEO of their stock exchange. Pretty important guy. And he described the situation as Germany is becoming a third world country. That's how he described it. He said he saw Germany as becoming a junk shop. And then he added, it's over, referring to the German economic miracle. What an extraordinary set of statements. Now, Stephen, let me ask you and your viewers a question. Do you think that story, big as it is, was covered by our national media? I'm thinking mainly of the BBC and Sky News in the way that it should have been. In other words, given prominence.
No, of course not. And I was horrified to hear from you, actually, that there was a terror attack in Germany in recent hours in one of the Christmas markets there. And I went on ABC. I also went on news.com and couldn't find a single thing about it. There may be something now. I did see something on Sky News, but it's a little bit horrifying that there's been a terror attack somewhere in the world and leading news outlets are not covering it.
Well, so, I don't know how Australians feel, but imagine a city in Australia, not one of the state capitals necessarily, but in this case, it happens to be a state capital in Germany. So, what's your smallest state capital, Stephen, in Australia?
I'd probably say it'd be Hobart in Tasmania.
Okay, let's take Hobart. So imagine that in Hobart, a few hours ago, I'm talking probably now about 10 hours ago, something like that, that some crazed guy mowed through a Christmas market, deliberately targeting pedestrians, ploughing through them, killed 2, including a young child, and the death toll may still rise, of course, and severely injured 70 more. I would have thought that that's a pretty big news story, and that's what's happened. Now, we monitor the German news, so that's why I mentioned it to you during the night.
Well, you just by chance we were talking about Hobart. Well, down in Tasmania in Port Arthur in the mid to late 90s, we had the Port Arthur massacre, and that was a major event here in Australia, and largely it could have been the direct cause of why we had gun laws introduced here in this country. So I'm sure the UK heard about that at the time, and other parts in the world. I know the Americans ask us a lot about that incident and want to know more. So it doesn't matter where it is. I mean, it doesn't have to be in a major city. If there's a terror attack somewhere in the world, then I think it should be covered by news outlets.
Yeah, and I mean, this was always going to happen. German markets, Christmas markets, are well known right across Europe. They're a big feature, and we knew that they were going to be a target. I'm very sorry to say that this news didn't actually surprise us, because we expected it. We just didn't know where it was going to be. It happens to be in a city in the former East Germany, but it was on the cards. And maybe one of the reasons why you haven't seen it is because the perpetrator is allegedly of Arab origin, originally a migrant to Germany, but it's a bit more confused than that, and I don't want to say too much more. We know an awful lot more about it, but I would prefer not to discuss that until all details are confirmed.
Yeah, no, it's I've been to Christmas markets in Germany, and they're wonderful. They're amazing, and to think that someone could bring such violence to one of these, traditions in Germany is absolutely horrific. But we better keep.
Families, Stephen. I mean, with
Yeah,
young
that's right. Exactly.
children,
Just going around enjoying Christmas.
shocking. Anyway, what's the problem in Germany is they've had mass immigration since Angela Merkel declared all welcome here in 2015, if you recall, and essentially opened the floodgates to Europe to vast numbers, millions of migrants. They soon closed again, by the way, when they realized what they'd done. But by then the damage had been done, and Germany is still suffering to this day. And as, of course, are we in the United Kingdom in slightly different ways. So do you want our number one?
Let's bring it on. Number one. So this is the top social media post on Facts for EU.
It is, and you should roll music really for this. Do 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 do. There you are. I've done it for you. Our Christmas number one is a lovely lady that I know. Her name is Baroness Kate Hoey. She was a former Labour minister, cabinet minister. She actually hails from Northern Ireland. I can tell your viewers that she is, in my opinion, a very sincere and honest politician. And of course, as we all know, that isn't something you can say about everybody. And she came in at number one because she talked about a particular issue to do with the UK leaving the EU. And it was about, she described this regulation that was being imposed on the people of Northern Ireland as far more humiliating than anything ever imposed on the UK when we were members. And I don't know whether your audience is aware, but Northern Ireland kind of got left behind. Northern Ireland is an integral part of the United Kingdom. The full title is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And yet, I'm afraid, Northern Ireland was sacrificed as part of our leaving because the EU wanted to punish the UK. We now have a situation where nearly 300 laws govern the people of Northern Ireland that they have no say over, that their politicians have no say over. Now, you can't get less democratic than that, but that is the situation that they're living under. And they're fighting it.
Yeah, and we recently did a global discussion forum on that issue with Dan Boucher, Jim Alistair, and also Ben Habib. So check that one out if you're following on us. It's on the CIBUK YouTube. It's also on the Commanding the Narrative platform. So if you're interested in that issue, go and check that one out because it was a very interesting conversation. And it blows my mind sitting here in Australia that that Northern Ireland can be separated from the rest of Great Britain, but that seems to be the case. So anyway,
I just can't imagine if one of the states of Australia, say Queensland or something, found itself under foreign law, and moreover, the people couldn't do anything about it, and the state legislature couldn't do anything about it either. Just extraordinary. So there you go. That's the social media lot. Do you want a quick rundown on you tell me what you want.
Well, before we do, let's introduce it properly. Here we go.
Here we go at this week's Pick of the Pops Top 20.
Unfortunately, no one could see Leigh dancing. Oh, there he goes. All right, let's get into it. Top 5 website articles.
Okay, so fresh in at number 5, we've got some great Brexit Britain news that you're not going to hear elsewhere. Our global exports soared by nearly 40% since we left the EU, despite the establishment media trying to claim that the economy is just tanked since. No. Total UK exports climbed by 240 billion in just 4 years after we left. So that was a great story. It appealed to a huge number of people. At number 4, we have that same story from Kate Hoey that I just referred to. So the only piece that actually appears in both top 5s is the Kate Hoey piece. Lovely lady, as I said. So I'm delighted that she gets this accolade from the readers of our website, as well as millions of people on social media. Where do we go to next? We go to, yes, if you believe nations should be sovereign, then this is for you. And this really appealed to a vast number of people. It came in at number 3, and it was essentially about Brexit Britain. It was a worldwide live-streamed event, much like this one, and it was specifically, again, about this Northern Ireland issue, because this is an iconic issue that resonates around the world. People around the world simply cannot understand how it's possible in the modern world for a part of the United Kingdom to be divorced from any of the normal democratic means that they have at their disposal, that you would expect them to have at their disposal. That doesn't happen in Northern Ireland. And so that was a biggie. Then at number 2, every time we run something like this, Stephen, it's popular. Brexit Britain is outperforming the Eurozone, says the influential global S&P report. Standard & Poor is something that all market operators read. And what it really came down to was the Eurozone is tanking, while Brexit Britain is banking it in. Sorry, that was my headline. It's a bit cheesy, but we produced a whole load of data from that report, backing up that report, showing why that was. You know, that the UK was performing far above the Eurozone. The reason, Stephen, why these reports are important is because the public in the UK isn't getting this information in other ways. So we're trying to pump it out in relatively short, punchy articles with bullet-pointed summaries, with great at-a-glance charts, as we call them, so people can get a truthful idea of actually what's going on. So now we come to number 1. I'm in a Christmas mood. Hey, why not? I just got great medical news yesterday, so I am in a good mood.
Very good.
At number 1, my favorite Frenchman. We have Monsieur le Président, Emmanuel Macron, who... I can't even read this. Oh, yeah. This report was great. I don't know if Australians know this, but we have... Do you remember you had a real problem with boat migrants some years ago? And you solved it. You had a very, very different government then, but you stopped it. Well, in the UK, it keeps going up and up and up. And when our new Prime Minister, the Labour Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, was going for the election this year, he promised he'd stop it. Well, guess what? The numbers are higher than they were last year since he became Prime Minister. And this report basically highlights the fact that the sheer amount that can be claimed by migrants when they come to the UK And it isn't just the initial migrant, it's then their families and so on. They're crossing from France, which is a safe country, and France refuses to take them back. And in the last, let me see, 2018 to 2024, so the last 6 years or so, 140,000 migrants have made a very dangerous crossing from France to the UK. And sadly, some of those have perished along the way. The French Navy escort these boats to English waters and pass them over. And then the English Navy has to, or the lifeboat, we have something called the RNLI, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. They will then
the same thing was happening here in Australia. I mean, boats were coming from Indonesia. A lot of them were capsizing or encountering bad weather, and then they would have to be saved by the Australian Navy or the Coast Guard or whatever. A lot of them weren't. A lot of them just died because they're so far out to sea.
Yep.
I guess people desperate to come to Australia, or in your case, the United Kingdom, for another life, but it's not the way to do it. You need to come in legally. You need to come in through the right methods.
So what this report highlighted was the relative, the different ways that these people are dealt with in France compared to the UK, and the beneficent UK versus the frugal French, if you want to put it that way.
Well, and you've got a whole list of them here. This is what an illegal immigrant will get if they get to the UK. All amounts are shown tax-free and require no contribution to the UK state. Accommodation, a flat, house, hotel, hostel, or bed and breakfast. Weekly cash allowance of almost £50 per person. They're free education for your children, free school meals, free NHS healthcare and free prescriptions, free access to a dentist and free dental care, free eyesight tests to help paying for glasses, extra money for food if you're pregnant or a mother with a child under age 3 or under. A pregnant mother gets an extra of just over £5 per week. A baby under 1 year old gets an extra almost £10 a week per baby. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So, you do want to be, compassionate, and you do want to provide, a safe haven for people, but you got to live within your means as well. And I'm sure UK taxpayers, when they're facing a cost of living crisis, are not too thrilled about illegal immigrants coming in and receiving all these benefits.
Yeah, I think there's two aspects. The one you just mentioned, there's a lot of people suffering from cost of living crisis in the UK, as I believe there are in Australia too. So that's another thing that we share. So that's very, very important. But there's a whole lot of other issues here as well. Probably the most important is this. How can you be a genuine refugee if you're fleeing a country, a civilized country like France? You're not at any risk at all in France. And yet you are undertaking an extremely hazardous journey across a dangerous channel of waters in order to come to the UK. Why? Because you're going to get much better benefits. So we're talking about economic migrants, but we're being told by our new Labour government that they should be called irregular migrants. Well, I'm sorry, but all of this manipulation of language, I love language, but I hate manipulation of language. It just won't wash. And do you know what? One of the things I've learned in 9 years working 7 days a week on this kind of stuff is that the public are a great deal smarter than the politicians give them credit for. And the public get this. They understand that these people are not true migrants. If they were, they would have applied for asylum through legal routes. They would have had a cast iron case. Instead, they cross the channel, they throw their passports and their mobile phones in the water halfway over, so they can't be identified. The younger ones, and when I say younger ones, I'm talking up to the age of about 29, claim to be 17 or younger in order to get better treatment. This is the kind of stuff that's been going on for years, which I have to say we have highlighted for many, many years. In more recent years, perhaps the highest profile figure to do so is Mr. Nigel Farage, who I believe is quite well known in Australia as he is here, and as he is in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, at the home of a certain Mr. Donald Trump.
Well, that leads us into a number of other issues that were big in the UK. I guess the UK election was a massive event. You've sent through this chart, and look, we discussed it at the time. If you want to go back and watch the interview that I did with Leigh, talking about the UK election, we broke down all the numbers and went right through it. So don't want to dwell on that too much today, apart from just pointing out again, you can see at number 3 there, Reform UK, the percentage of the votes cast that they received, but compared to only 5 seats won. I mean, I guess that's just how the cookie crumbles in your first past the post system. But what I want to ask you, Leigh, is in the aftermath of the election, we're hearing that Keir Starmer is really tanking in the polls. You guys have 5-year terms in the United Kingdom, which is a long, long time, and he's just started his journey. What do the next few years for the UK look like under Keir Starmer?
That's a very good question. You know that it always takes time for economic decisions of any government to filter through into the lives of people. The daily lives of people and of businesses come to that. Well, they've now had about 6 months, and it's now starting to be felt. And the early decisions from the government have pretty much exclusively been very unpopular, extremely unpopular. So Sir Keir Starmer's personal ratings have plummeted, as has the government's ratings. The Labour Party's ratings have also plummeted. So nevertheless, they're ploughing on, and they're ploughing on with policies that are extremely unpopular. For example, with farmers, they've changed the way that farmers can pass on their farms to their children, which has been going on for generations.
It's crazy. I was hearing, and you might be able to clarify, but there was reports that these inheritance taxes were so severe that families would end up losing their farm after only a few generations.
There are many families that are worried that, in fact, they will not be able to afford to pass on their family farm to their children, and effectively the farm will have to be sold. And perhaps a farm that's been in a family for generations.
It's always clear when left-leaning politicians get into power, and you only have to look as far back as the Russian Revolution and what came after that. They always go after the farmers first, don't they? They always want to target the farmers and make it difficult for them and really attack them, when farmers are quite capable of dealing with issues on their own. Why would he target the farmers in this way, in such a direct sort of way? I mean, it's a real clear attack, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because what they want to do is start clawing back money in the economy in order to fund their massive pay rises for the public sector. It's the public sector unions that have been funding the Labour Party for years. Yeah. And they've been giving, ever since they got into power, they've been settling the existing disputes with some of these unions very fast. I mean, within weeks, with above average pay increases, with no stipulations about any increases in productivity. And it's going to cost billions. So they're trying to find ways of clawing back some money. Now, why farmers? Well, how many farmers do you know who vote Labour? Right? Not too many. So there is an easy target group. What they didn't account for is the fact that the public are on the side of the farmers, because without farmers, we grow no food, and without food, we can't live. Now, we already import far too much food into the UK, which a lot of farmers are quite rightly, I think, deeply upset about, because it's food that is produced under far less stringent safety standards than our own farmers produce food under. So that's one example. The other example is pensioners. Old people this winter are going to go without what we call in the UK the winter fuel allowance. Because of the policies of this government, they decided to reorganize the winter fuel allowance, and thousands of old age pensioners will no longer receive the winter fuel allowance. And there are horrifying stories now of elderly, an elderly widow in her 80s, huddled up under blankets, doesn't dare to turn on the heating anymore because there's no fuel allowance. This is the kind of stuff that's going on. This is impacting public consciousness, Stephen.
And to me, it just shows what a Ponzi scheme our governments, because similar things are happening here in Australia as well. I mean, we don't have this inheritance tax, but there's other issues I could point to where farmers are being attacked. It's a real Ponzi scheme because, as we say in the article that we wrote on Facts for EU on Friday, these governments are starting to govern for the city elites and at the expense of people in rural communities. And if you look at I'm sure it's the same in the UK. Here in Australia, the Albanese government is producing, they're claiming they're creating all these jobs, right? But the majority of these jobs are in the public service. They're going to bureaucrats. They're inflating the Canberra bubble. So all the money is getting pumped into the bureaucrats, and that's making their job numbers look good, and it's inflating their economic numbers. But all the people that are producing things, producing the food, producing the fiber, keeping this country going, mining as well, or just everyday taxpayers, they're the ones paying for all this stuff. They're just getting squeezed tighter and tighter and tighter to the point where you just said there's pensioners and elderly people that are too afraid to turn their heaters on because cost of living is just out of control. When do we call this out for what it is? Yeah,
and I'd just point out one other thing. How many older people vote Labour? Very, very few compared to, if you look at the data as we've done, the 18 to 25-year-old age bracket, Labour win hands down. As you start to get up over 65, then very small proportions vote Labour. So if you're looking as a Labour strategic advisor, where do you hit people in order to try and save some money to pay for your massive spending in the public sector? Well, you hit the people who are not going to vote for you at the next election anyway. And, it's a bit of a cynical point. And I would like, if you'll allow me, Stephen, just to make one point. I chair a number of organizations, all of which are non-partisan. We don't take a party stance at all. We only speak out on issues to do with independence, sovereignty, democracy, and freedom. In this particular case, I'm essentially, I suppose, into the personal arena where I'm expressing some personal opinions. But nevertheless, most of the time we're talking about those four main thrusts of what we do. And we only criticize parties of whatever color, whatever political leanings. We only criticize based on sovereignty, independence, democracy, and freedom. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah. Okay. I guess the other big issue from or the aftermath of the election is the performance of Reform UK. Now, apparently, these photos were tweeted out by Elon Musk. This is at Mar-a-Lago, as you mentioned before, where there's talk that Elon is going to make a sizable contribution to Reform UK. Rumors of a $100 million donation. I'm assuming that's US money, which is
US, yes.
Yeah, which is a significant amount. What will this mean? As I said, that the election in the UK is a long way away. You know, within 5 years' time, but that gives Nigel Farage a lot of resources to set up branches and to build his Reform UK movement, doesn't it?
It's a game changer if it happens. It's that simple. I've studied politics all my life, and although by background I'm actually a businessman, but I've always taken an interest. And if you told me 6 months ago, Stephen, that I'd be telling you that there is a possibility, albeit small, but there is a possibility that Nigel Farage and the Reform Party could win the next general election in the UK, I would have laughed at that idea. And the reason is because it takes decades in the UK to change. It's a very, very old country, and these things don't happen easily. We've had some so-called, wonder parties, wunderkinds of the political sphere arise in previous years. I'm thinking of, say, the Social Democrat Party, I don't know what it was, 30 years ago or something. And they come and they go. Now, the interesting thing, and I think you are quite right to point this out, Stephen, is that the difference with Reform is that they are going through a gap that both parties are leaving totally vacant. And that gap is one where the majority of the British people sit. And Reform increasingly are the only people that are talking about that. You've got the Conservative Party who they've just elected a new leader, and they're going through a process of reconciliation and change and review, critically review. And Kemi Badenoch, the new leader, has said it's going to take years to review and to build back the trust of the British people. Well, they've certainly lost the trust of the British people over the last 14 years. And I say that quite apolitically. I mean, that is just fact. They have. The Labour Party didn't win the last election. The Conservatives lost it. And I think it's very important for people around the world to understand that the Conservative Party lost touch with its roots, and an awful lot of Conservatives either stayed at home or switched to Reform. And you showed our breakdown earlier on. There we go again. And Reform actually beat what used to be the third party, the Lib Dems, to take third place. Now they're growing even faster, and they're hot on the heels, to be honest, of the Conservative Party. Nobody would have believed that a while ago. So your question about Elon, I've got to be careful what I say because I know a little bit about this, but if Elon were to part with some of his cash, it will make a massive difference to the organization on the ground for Reform, which is what they've been lacking. And if they can give that a shove, plus, second point, if they can use all of the social media techniques that were used by Donald Trump in the States, which Elon knows inside out, and if those are used in the UK, I think, frankly, at the next election, all bets are off. And I'm even thinking about making a punt myself now.
Well, it's going to be very, very interesting. Now, I'm conscious of the time, but we've still got a lot to talk about. So let's try and squeeze in a few more issues. Now, this was a massive story that came through from the UK to Australia. It's the riots and everything that we saw after some unfortunate stabbings of some children. 3 of those children died, which is a tragic story. And the result was these riots. And further on from that was that a few people, you might have the actual numbers, were actually jailed because of their social media posts. Has it died down in the UK now? Are we still seeing a lot of anger from this, or is it continuing?
It's continuing, I'm afraid. What we've seen is the most extraordinary display of two-standard policing and justice in the UK. I am not proud of my country for this at the moment. I am a very proud British person, but in this case, I find it very difficult to be proud of what's been going on. For your Australian viewers, I would summarize it like this. You are more likely to go to jail in the UK right now if you publish an offensive tweet than if you commit some kind of crime. That may sound quite incredible, but it's true. And I'll give you one example which relates to Nigel Farage. You may know that we've had a couple of MPs killed in the last few years, tragically, by people where the MPs were going about their duty, trying to do their normal, what we call over here constituency surgeries, where the members of your constituency can come and see you with a problem and say, can you help me to resolve my problem with the council or whatever it is, right? 2 MPs were killed in the performance of those duties. So it's something that's taken very seriously. Now, why have I given you that background? It's because Nigel Farage, when he was out campaigning in the election, had 2 incidents that were, most people think, quite serious. One was some idiot throwing portions of concrete brick at him, which, had they hit him, that could have been terribly serious. He managed to duck and avoid. And the other one was this stupid girl who threw a milkshake over him. Now, a milkshake sounds innocuous, but that could so easily have been sulfuric acid. And that has happened in other countries. So you can imagine the alarm and how Mr. Farage felt about that. I certainly can. He's been through quite a lot in his life, and he brushed it off to a certain extent. But honestly, it would have scared the living daylights out of most people in his situation, knowing that he's had other politicians who've actually been killed in manners like that. So you've got people like that. Oh, and by the way, that just so you know, that young woman who threw it, did she go to jail? No. This week was given a sentence, and it was a suspended sentence. So what we have at the moment in the UK is a huge number of people who've never been convicted of anything in their lives, who've made maybe an ill-advised post on a social media platform, Facebook or Twitter or whatever, in the heat of the moment, then being arrested, convicted, and going to jail for just sending one post on social media. And in order to accommodate them in our jails, the government has had to order the release of hardened criminals to make room for these everyday Joes and Jones. Otherwise, there would be no place for them in our prisons. Quite extraordinary.
And it happened quite quickly too, right? I mean, they were arrested and charged and sentenced pretty, within a few weeks or so, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if my home were raided in the UK, and let's just suppose the police actually weren't so busy dealing with offensive tweets that they could actually solve a crime or two. Let's suppose they actually found the suspects. It would be months and months and months before they'd face trial, and months and months and months before they'd ever contemplate going to jail, if that were the sentence. With these people, they were dealt with, some of them within 24 hours, some of them within 2 weeks. Quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Now, I want to squeeze in this question because Nigel Farage is a big figure here in Australia, and we hear a lot about him, possibly more than we do about Keir Starmer, and maybe largely that's due to Nigel Farage visiting Australia a few times. Another person that we hear about, and honestly, I don't know too much about this man. I did see him interviewed recently on Jordan Peterson's podcast, is Tommy Robinson. Now, from your perspective in the UK, this is him being interviewed here by Jordan Peterson. He comes across as very convincing. If you don't know any of the background of it, he certainly seems fairly honest. I know he's got a very his reputation precedes him as well. From you being in the UK, what can you tell the Australian audience about Tommy Robinson?
Yeah, complex character, interesting character, I have to say. He doesn't bore me, which is always a plus when I'm looking at anybody in the political arena. He has a background in I don't often use the word far right, by the way, because the establishment media use the term far right for anyone who is to the right of Karl Marx. So I don't often use it, but he does have a far right background. He speaks out on issues that an awful lot of ordinary people would agree with, but perhaps occasionally does so a little bit too stridently and is sometimes his worst enemy. And I think he might agree with that. It's almost as though sometimes he has a little bit of a death wish in terms of going to prison. Bear in mind, when somebody like Tommy Robinson goes to prison, he is automatically in isolation. And the reason for that is because our prisons are so full of people of the Islamic faith that he would not be safe in the general population in any prison.
We've got a question here from Martin Taylor. He's asking, is Tommy still in jail?
Oh, do you know what? I don't follow his movements that closely, so I don't know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think he is. I think it was only recent that he was incarcerated again. So
I think you might be right, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's finish up. There's a lot more that we did want to talk about, but I definitely want to get from you your top 3 worst performers, and your top best performers of the year. So maybe we'll talk about maybe the losers first. Give us your top losers.
Okay. Happy to do so very fast. Top losers in 2024 democracy as a whole, sad to say. Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister in the UK, the worst general election loss in 100 years. I think that's got to be right up there. Then my good old friend, President Macron, that I mentioned earlier from France, he lost the general election that he called big time, and lost it, by the way. The biggest party in France, the winner there, was Marine Le Pen from the right-wing party. And but she was overwhelmed by, as usual, by a whole lot of coalition parties from the left and the right to make sure she didn't get power. But anyway, Macron is on his fourth prime minister this year. 4 prime ministers in 1 year. He's been in power for 7 years, and he's had 6 prime ministers, and 4 of them this year alone. And if you look at the numbers, the last 3, 240 days, about 99 days, and the current one has so far been in power for 7 days, and I'm not sure how much longer he'll last after Christmas. All right. So, and the other one I wanted to say that did make the news just about, and we certainly published it, was for losers. Was under 16s in Australia for the authoritarian Albo government taking away their social media.
You know, there's so many issues related to that, which even people that are against it haven't thought of. I was talking to someone the other day, and she said, you know, a lot of people under 16, who are playing sport, they get notified about things through social media. So if the ground's closed because of excessive rain, they get notified. If it's for some reason training's being cancelled, they get notified through social media. How is it going to happen now? I mean, do people have to go to old school, calling every single person? I mean, the government have just made this policy on the run. It's crazy, but look, we won't go into it because we'll probably discuss that next week on the Australian version of the year in review. But give us your top winners for 2024.
Okay. The right would be my first generic. Nigel Farage and Reform would be the first really big one. We haven't got time, but they've done spectacularly well electorally and in so many other ways. Trump, landslide when it was predicted to go the other way and always be a bit on the knife edge. Landslide for Trump. Marine Le Pen in France, she won the general election. So a right-winger won the general election, will never get to power under the current circumstances, but she won it. And I just want the audience to be aware of that, because you almost never hear the fact she did. And finally, a guy that maybe your audience might have heard of, Geert Wilders. And I hope you're impressed out there with my Dutch accent. Geert Wilders from the Netherlands.
We just pronounce it Gert in Australia. Gert.
Yeah. Well, that's because you're ignorant. But he won. You're welcome. Always said with a smile. He won the Dutch general elections, and yet again, well, what happened there actually was interesting. They had to partner with a coalition. They actually did manage to partner with a coalition to be part of the government. But it's interesting. All these coalition governments in Europe are now creaking at the edges. The German one has just fallen apart, as an example. So it's the EU is in a bit of a mess. So losers, I would say that the EU has been a big loser throughout 2024 in so many different ways.
Looks like my camera is frozen, but maybe just to finish up, let me know, has this year has it been a good year, 2024? Has it been a good year for the UK?
I'll tell you what 2024 has been. It's been an absolutely amazing year for developments right across the board. I mean, we do not have the time to write about all of the different things that have been going on. So it's been extraordinary. For the UK, it was, if you let the people get on with it, it's been a great year. We had an election mid-year, and since then it's been a real problem because the government's come in, they've done a whole load of unpopular things. So it's kind of a mixed bag, and we're an awful lot of people are very worried about next year because already we have the cost of living crisis. An awful lot of people are worried it's going to get a whole lot worse. And instead of being top of the G7 in terms of growth, which we have been for the last, which we were for a couple of years, it looks like we might sink to the bottom. So.
What about 2025? How does that look for?
What
needs to happen in the UK in 2025?
Well, in the UK,
big question.
Yeah, I think the big thing is that certain people need to stand up and start really presenting an effective opposition. We don't have one at the moment, except for Reform. They are presenting, but they only have 5 MPs, despite coming third in the election. The fourth party won, I don't know, can't remember now, some 80 seats. And yet they came.
It was 72. The Lib Dems won.
72, is it? Yeah. But overall, you know, I think one of the issues that's coming up in the UK more and more, and I'm guessing in Australia too, is some of the threats that we're facing, and the whole China, Iran, Russia, North Korea axis is very worrying. Certainly, I worry, you know, for Australia in terms of what's going on with China. I think the other biggie is the whole freedom of expression, freedom of ideas. This applies definitely in the UK, and I believe it applies in Australia with your misinformation and disinformation bill. We're facing similar challenges. I, for one, will say here and now, I stand up for freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and I don't care. And you can take me away in irons if you like, but you're not going to stop me. That's how I feel about it.
That's how we need to be. We have to be like that. We can't back down. We can't just let these crazy people take it all away from us. But look, let's finish up.
I would urge your viewers, you know, support Stephen in Australia because he's saying all the right things. Support him. The guy can't live on fresh air. But look at him. I mean, he's a thin bastard, and you know, it's because he puts in a huge number of hours on these things. It doesn't get much from it. Doesn't ask for much from it. But please support Stephen in Australia. Oh, and can I just put a plug in for us because we need it too. Please support factsforeu.org. Go to the website. We produce, the charts I read out earlier come from 322 reports this year. Can you imagine how much work went into those? And yet we get a pittance in terms of donations, although we're very grateful for those that we get. But the other side, Stephen, and I'm sure it's the same in Australia, are getting millions for the organizations on the other side from a foreign billionaire. And I have all the data on how much money he's given. So there you go.
Yes, I think you had something. Was it this article here? If you want to know what, oh no, not that one. Anyway, I had it up there somewhere. Anyway, I'm sure people can go find it on Facts for EU. It's called "Can a Foreign Billionaire's Money Buy British Votes?" There's some information in there as well. For some reason, oh, there it is. We've got it. Check out that article. I mean, I want to point that out because you do cover so many different topics. It's all your own independent research. It's very unique research. You won't find it anywhere else. And I know, in speaking with you, GB News, which is the fastest growing media outlet in the UK, are picking up on a lot of your work. So
They are indeed, yeah.
Leigh's encouraging you all to support me, but I'm encouraging you all to support Leigh and Facts for EU and CIBUK, because the work that you do is fantastic, and you do get a lot of, as you've said, you do get a lot of information that no one else is covering. And it's just coming from official sources. So it's excellent stuff. So look, mate, I really appreciate you coming on today. As I said, we probably could go even longer discussing more things from 2024. But I hope you have a very Merry Christmas over there in Europe. And hopefully you can still say Merry Christmas over there. And also Happy New Year as well, Leigh.
Can I just say to everyone in Australia, a country that his people I absolutely adore, that yes, indeed, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Keep on fighting. Last year, you did a major thing in defeating that voice referendum, and you've got spirit and you've got fight in you. Please keep fighting, because we need our peoples to stay together on this stuff and to keep a decent world for our children.
Yes. I see Big Rob now Bandian's in the chat. He's saying Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. But on that note, please, as you know, I say every single time, please share this out. If you know people living in the UK who might be interested in this review, let them know about it. Follow Leigh's work at Facts for EU, and also head on to the Commanding the Narrative website. Sign up. You'll get a weekly newsletter with everything that's happening, all the articles. The article that we just co-wrote will be on the newsletter as well. But for now, Merry Christmas to everyone. If you are watching Commanding the Narrative, we do have a huge interview tomorrow night with Copenhagen Atomics, which are talking about molten salt reactors. We might even have some special politicians call in for that one. This nuclear issue is going to be a huge issue here in Australia in the upcoming election. So check that one out. But for now, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.